On January 30th, 1933, Adolf Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany. The conservative elites believed they had control, that they could contain him. They could not have been more wrong. Hitler moved with breathtaking speed and brutality. He didn't need years to dismantle democracy. He needed mere weeks. This is the most critical and darkest chapter, the establishment of the dictatorship, the path to total war, and the unimaginable horror of the Holocaust. Chapter 1. The End of Democracy, Fire, Law, and Gleichschaltung. The final destruction of German democracy began with a single, crucial event, the Reichstag fire on February 27, 1933. The exact cause is still debated, but Hitler immediately blamed the communists and declared a state of emergency. He pushed through the Reichstag fire decree. This decree suspended essential civil liberties, freedom of speech, assembly, and the right to privacy for the next 12 years. Hitler now ruled by emergency decree, effectively creating a police state. The final nail in the coffin was the Enabling Act, Ermächtigungsgesetz, passed just weeks later. This law allowed Hitler's government to enact laws without the consent of the parliament or the president. It was a self-decapitation of democracy. The Weimar Republic was dead. What followed was the Gleichschaltung, or coordination. This meant bringing all areas of German life, politics, media, culture, trade unions, and education under the complete control of the NSDAP. All political opposition was banned, arrested, or driven into exile. The foundation for total dictatorship was cemented. With power absolute, the regime immediately focused on its core ideological goal, the systematic removal of Jews from German public life. Persecution began quickly, with dismissals from civil service, universities, and the justice system. But the true institutionalization of racism came in 1935 with the Nuremberg laws. These laws stripped German Jews of their citizenship and banned marriage and sexual relations between Jews and Aryan Germans. Overnight, Jews were officially declared non-citizens and legally segregated. This was not the end, but a necessary step towards the later mass murder. The terror escalated into outright state-sponsored violence with Kristallnacht in November 1938. Synagogues were burned, Jewish businesses were ransacked, and tens of thousands of Jewish men were arrested and sent to concentration camps. This night of terror made it clear the regime was ready to employ extreme violence against its own population. Hitler's domestic consolidation of power went hand in hand with his foreign policy goal to revoke the Treaty of Versailles and gain Lebensraum, living space, in the East. This required war. In open defiance of the treaty, Hitler introduced conscription and began massive rearmament in 1935. The Western powers, Britain and France, responded only with diplomatic protest, a policy of appeasement that emboldened Hitler. Hitler tested the international community by illegally remilitarizing the Rhineland in 1936. When he met no resistance, he proceeded with the Anschluss, annexation of Austria in 1938, followed by the seizure of the Czech Sudetenland. Each act of aggression was successful, convincing him that the West would never fight. The final step came on September 1, 1939, when Germany invaded Poland. Hitler ignored all warnings. Britain and France, finally forced to act, declared war. The Second World War had begun. The early years of the war were defined by the Blitzkrieg, lightning war, fast, overwhelming mechanized attacks that quickly conquered Poland, Norway, France, and much of Western Europe. Hitler stood at the peak of his power. As the war raged, the pursuit of Lebensraum in the East led to the radicalization of the persecution. The systematic mass murder of Europe's Jews, the Holocaust, was implemented. This was not a byproduct of war, but a central goal of the regime. After initial mass shootings by the Einsatzgruppen, the murder was industrialized. At the Wannsee Conference in 1942, the logistical planning for the final solution was finalized. The systematic deportation of Jews from all over Europe to extermination camps like Auschwitz-Birkenau and Treblinka. Approximately 6 million Jews were murdered in this industrial genocide, but the Nazi terror extended far beyond the Jewish population. Millions of others were systematically persecuted and murdered. Sinti and Roma, estimated 200,000 to 500,000 victims. Political opponents and dissidents. Homosexuals. The sick and disabled murdered in the T4 euthanasia program. Millions of Soviet prisoners of war and Polish intellectuals. The entire nation was mobilized for a war of conquest and an ideological war of extermination. But at the height of his power, Hitler made a fatal strategic error that would lead directly to his downfall. In June 1941, Hitler launched the invasion of the Soviet Union. This was the moment the war turned from one of conquest into a war of annihilation on an unimaginable scale. The massive scale of the Eastern Front, coupled with the brutal Russian winter, broke the momentum of the Wehrmacht. The tide was turning. In our final video, we explore the collapse. The turning point at Stalingrad, the Allied landings on D-Day, the inner resistance, and the last desperate days in the Führer bunker that led to the death of Hitler, and the final total defeat of the Nazi regime. Don't miss video 4, The End.